For 5 years, one man ran the telephone switchboard a few feet from Adolf Hitler. And, on the afternoon of April 30th, 1945, he was among the last people alive to look through the door at Hitler and Eva Braun dead on the floor. But when Rochus Misch finally broke his silence decades later, the detail that made headlines wasn't what he saw in that room. It was the 3 words he insisted on using for the rest of his life to describe the most wanted man in history: a wonderful boss. And what those words quietly reveal about everyone who kept the machine running. To understand why a friendly old man calling Hitler a wonderful boss should unsettle you, you have to start with what the wonderful boss was actually running. While Rochus Misch plugged and unplugged telephone lines a few feet from the Führer, a continent-sized machine was doing its work. By the time the war ended, roughly 6 million Jews had been murdered, shot at the edges of pits, worked to death in camps, or killed in facilities built for nothing but industrial-scale murder. Whole communities that had stood for centuries were emptied in a matter of days. Trains ran on schedules, and ledgers were kept. The destruction of an entire people was organised with the same bureaucratic calm as a postal service, and it ran at full capacity in the exact same years Misch spent inside Hitler's inner circle. This is the floor the rest of the story stands on, and it matters that we lay it first. Because everything you are about to hear, the charm, the warmth, the idea that he was just a normal man, only means something if you never lose sight of the scale of the thing that charm sat next to. Millions of people did not die in the abstract. They died in specific places, on specific mornings, while the paperwork that sent them there moved through offices staffed by ordinary, agreeable men who went home at night and thought of themselves as decent. And here is where the real story begins. Because for the next 60 years, Rochus Misch would insist, calmly and consistently, that the sheer scale of all of this was genuine news to him. He stood at the dead centre of the Reich, and he would tell you, right up until his death, that he never really saw it. He was not an architect of any of it, and that is precisely what makes him worth an entire video. Rochus Misch was nobody's idea of a mastermind. Orphaned young, he joined the SS in 1937 at the age of 20, pulled in less by deep ideology than by the current that swallowed so many young men with no money and no direction. In September 1939, during the invasion of Poland, he was shot through the lung while helping negotiate the surrender of a fortress outside Warsaw. That wound, and a recommendation from an officer named Wilhelm Monke, lifted him off the front line and dropped him into the last place on earth you would expect an ordinary soldier to land: Hitler's personal staff. By May 1940, Misch was one of 2 SS men assigned to the escort detail. His job titles sound almost quaint against the backdrop of a world war: bodyguard, courier, telephone operator. For 5 years he carried messages, guarded doors, and worked the switchboard that connected Hitler to his generals, his ministers, and the war itself. He was, quite literally, the man who put the calls through. And when the end came, that post ended up in the only place it could, sealed underground, beneath 4 meters of concrete.
Let's say after the 22nd. Yes, on the 22nd we went down in the bunker. Actually, we went down there whenever air raids took place. The Führer too. When the all clear was given, we left the bunker and went back into the Reich Chancellery. You know, this bunker wasn't to live in. He went back upstairs into his apartment, and we too. Our workplace was the telephone switchboard, and that was in the apartment too. We only went down in the bunker when air raid occurred.
Da waren wir dann auch runtergegangen in den Bunker. Das waren an und für sich Zellen, der war ja nicht groß.
Now, here is the verdict that made him famous, and it lands hardest coming straight off that body count. Asked again and again what Hitler was really like, Misch never wavered. No brute, no monster, no Superman. A very normal man, and, in the 3 words he refused to take back for the rest of his life, a wonderful boss. Sit in the discomfort of that for a moment, because the discomfort is the entire point. The man who watched the machine from a few feet away walked out of it, convinced he'd worked for a decent employer. We are going to walk right up to that locked door with him and look through it. So if the forgotten corners of the Reich's collapse are the kind of history you want more of, the subscribe button is the thing that keeps them coming. There is a crack running through Misch's story, and it is worth naming precisely, because the precise version is more damning than the myth. For years, the shorthand was that Misch claimed to know nothing at all. That is not quite what he said. He admitted, plainly, that he knew Dachau existed, that he knew there were camps. What he denied was the scale. He had no idea, he insisted, how vast it all was. And he reached, the way so many did, for the oldest excuse there was never a war, he said, when crimes weren't committed. Watch the move carefully, because you have seen it before. It is the same slide this channel traced through Reinhard Heydrich's cultured evenings and through the Braun family's careful silence. The quiet migration from I didn't know to I didn't know how much. It is not a mystery to be solved in his favour. It is a case study in how functionaries narrate their own innocence. And it demands the guardrail out loud. His charm is not exoneration. Just the telephone man is not a harmless character detail. It is exactly the defence the entire apparatus ran on, from the men who signed the orders down to the men who kept the lines open so those orders could travel.
Und da habe ich bewusst laut gesprochen. Ich wollte ein bisschen laut einfach.
And even I could understand everything clearly. I shouted, I can't hear you, please talk loud.
Ich habe einfach von mir aus ein bisschen mehr das Leben rein.
I was trying to put a little more life into this thing, to break the silence, with my loud words, you know. Nobody said a word. It was a drama. Dead silence in this bunker, like in a coffin.
And yet, this is the strange, uncomfortable truth of Rochus Misch. His unreliability is also what makes him irreplaceable. Every reason to distrust his conscience is a separate question from whether he was in that bunker, and he was. When the door to that study opened on the afternoon of 30 April, his were among the last living eyes to look through it. He is, for all his blind spots, still the only camera we have pointed at that door. So let's follow him down into the concrete. The afternoon Hitler died was not a shock that swept through the bunker. It was a date the people underground had already circled. On April the 22nd, 1945, in front of his staff, Hitler reportedly said the war was lost and that everybody could go. From that moment, the circle closest to him understood exactly how this ended. The boss would not flee Berlin, he would not be captured, he would take his own life, and they would be the ones left to deal with whatever remained. By then, the command structure was already tearing apart at the seams. Days earlier, Hermann Fegelein, an SS general and Eva Braun's own brother-in-law, had been hauled back to the bunker and shot for trying to slip out of the city. And here, Misch carried a secret to his grave. He claimed, decades later, that he knew who actually pulled the trigger on Fegelein, and he flatly refused to name the man. He even disputed the standard account, insisting Hitler never ordered the killing at all, only demoted him. Whether that is the truth or the tangled memory of an old man shielding someone, we will never know. Misch made certain of that.
Naja, hat mir gesagt, naja, geh, es soll wieder hingehen zum Dienst. Denn ich wurde vertreten so lange von einem Kameraden, der mich vertreten hatte. Ich musste ja, wenn ich mal ein bisschen schlafen wollte, habe ich eine Vertretung gehabt. Der Kamerad Retzbach. Ja, und dann...
Everyone in the bunker knew. It was clear to everyone from April 22nd that the boss would stay in Berlin and take his own life. But knowing the ending was coming did nothing to soften the afternoon it finally arrived. For all the years people have spent imagining that moment, the man closest to it heard almost nothing. On the afternoon of April 30th, Hitler and Eva Braun walked into the study and shut the door. Misch was at his switchboard, a few meters down the corridor, doing the only job he had left. He did not hear a shot. What he remembered instead was the silence. A dead, uncanny stillness in the hallway that unsettled him so badly he started talking loudly into the telephone, to anyone, about nothing at all, just to fill the air with a human sound. Then it broke. A voice came down the corridor calling for Hitler's valet. "Linger, linger, the time has come." The study door opened and Rochus Misch looked inside.
Wie gesagt, ich hatte immer die Möglichkeit, laut zu sprechen, weil ich am Telefon die Möglichkeit hatte, laut zu sprechen. Die anderen nuschelten dann immer so einer für sich hin. Es war das Ende von unten im Bunker. Am 30. Ja, dann war der Goebbels der Reichskanzler, das war dann mein Chef. Und dann ging das weiter. Dann kam der Herr Grätz runter, unser Posttechniker.
I looked inside and saw Hitler slumped over in his chair and Eva Braun lying beside him. He described what he saw with the flat, unhurried plainness of a man reading a shipping manifest. Hitler slumped forward in his chair. Eva Braun beside him, her legs drawn up. No drama in the telling, because the facts do not need any help. That understatement is somehow worse than any horror movie version could ever be. Everything after this moment is aftermath, and it is in the aftermath that Misch's memory turns genuinely strange. What happened next was the most feared man in Europe being carried out like a piece of furniture. Following a standing order Hitler had given long before, the bodies were wrapped and taken up to the Chancellery garden above to be burned. Misch watched the bundle pass him. 3 or 4 meters away, close enough that the detail he never lost was almost mundane. Past the edge of the sack, he could see the shoes.
Ach, was ist denn da schon wieder? Ist er nochmal weggegangen? Und dann kam er zurück und da hatte ich inzwischen schon den Russen am Apparat gehabt. Und da habe ich den General Krebs gerufen, sage ich, Herr General, ich habe jetzt hier den Russenanschluss. Ja, geben Sie mal her. Und der hat ja fließend Russisch mit dem gesprochen. Ich konnte zwar alles mithören, aber er sprach fließend Russisch mit dem Russen, denn der...
They wrapped him in a blanket and carried the bodies up the stairs into the Chancellery garden to burn them. And then came the part no film ever quite captures. The sheer administrative ordinariness of it. There was no ceremony, no collapse into chaos. There was a death to report, and Misch reported it, the way he had reported 100 things before. He ran to his commander, Franz Schädler, to pass the news up the chain, and the single most enormous event in that building's history moved through the hierarchy like any other dispatch.
Ja, dann gingen die Konferenzen mit den wenigen Leuten, Bormann, Goebbels, General Burgdorf, nicht, der Monike, ja, die haben dann gesprochen, abgesprochen, dann ist nach etwa 2 Stunden ist dann der...
When did it happen? I said, just now. At this very moment they are carrying him outside. But with the boss gone, only one question was left down in the concrete. Who would turn out the lights? The Reich did not end with a broadcast or a signature. It ended with one man quietly disconnecting a telephone board. Joseph Goebbels, who would kill himself and his family within a day, came over to Misch and released him from his post with a line that has trailed after Misch ever since. They had known how to live, and they would also know how to die. You can finish up now. So Misch reached down and pulled every plug on the switchboard, one after another. The man who had spent 5 years connecting Hitler to the world, now physically severing the Reich's last open line.
50. I never forget this number. That was the number of Hitler's apartment, same down for the bunker.
Dem Bunker gleichzeitig. Hat mir dann gesagt, nun,
Goebbels said,
ja,
you know, we have understood to live, and we also understand now to die. You can leave if you want, he said.
Jetzt zu meinen Kameraden gehen und da habe ich dann alle Kabel.
So I unplugged all cables, telex, phones, all connections. I plugged everything out. I told Henschel, the technician, now nobody can reach us down there. Then I was released by Goebbels. He went into the next room. I said goodbye to my neighbor Henschel.
Nachbar, dem Techniker Henschel verabschiedet.
Then the bunker went quiet in a way it never had before. Almost everyone was dead or gone. For a short, eerie stretch, only 2 living men remained beneath the concrete. Misch and a machinist named Johannes Henschel, keeping the lights and the air moving over the corpse of a regime.
And I left the bunker too. Henschel was the last one to stay in the bunker. So the both of us belong to the last remaining people of the bunker.
Beteiligten im Bunker.
Goebbels committed suicide, you know. As far as I remember, Henschel told me later, it was next to our room.
Hat mir Henschel gesagt, später nach der Gefangenschaft, nebenan im Raum.
In the early hours of May 2nd, Rochus Misch climbed up out of what he would later call the coffin of concrete, through a cellar window into a Berlin that no longer existed. And that city was about to swallow him whole for nearly a decade. Escaping the bunker was not the end of his war. It was the start of the longest chapter of his life. Misch was captured by the Red Army within days, and because of who he was and where he had stood, the Soviets did not let go. He was taken to the Lubyanka in Moscow. By his own account, Stalin refused to believe Hitler was truly dead, and Misch was interrogated hard for proof, pressed and broken so badly that at one point he wrote to Beria, the head of the secret police, asking simply to be shot. 9 years followed in Soviet prisons and labor camps before he was finally allowed home to Berlin in 1954. And then, for a very long time, he said almost nothing. He rebuilt a quiet life, ran a small shop, and kept the bunker to himself. But time did something no interrogator could. One by one, the others who had been down there died. The valet, the adjutant, the officers, the small circle of people who could say I was there thinned out year after year until, by the 2000s, Rochus Misch was effectively the last one standing. In 2008, he published his memoir, titled with total accuracy, The Last Witness. It became a bestseller, and a plaque went up near Potsdamer Platz. He did not just survive the bunker, he became its official narrator. But being the last voice in the room carries a hidden cost. When everyone who could contradict you is gone, your version stops being one, account among many, and quietly becomes the account. And that is exactly the problem this story has to close on. The interview was supposed to reveal Hitler's final days, and it did, but it revealed something larger and far more uncomfortable about the man doing the telling. Here was a witness who could describe a suicide in forensic, unflinching detail. The slumped chair, the shoes past the sack. And describe the genocide his employer set in motion in almost no detail at all. He once complained that the film Downfall got it wrong by making Hitler too loud, too quick to shout. He corrected the movie's version of his boss. He never once corrected his own conscience. So hold both of these things at the same time, because both are true. Rochus Misch's testimony is a real historical gift. Without men like him, the last hours in that bunker would be little more than guesswork. And Rochus Misch is a living demonstration of how ordinary, agreeable people talk their way out of enormous crimes, not by lying exactly, but by looking slightly to the left of the horror for 60 straight years. The first fact is valuable. The second is the one that should stay with you. And it comes down to one last image, when Misch finally hauled himself out of what he called the bunker of death. up into the smoking ruins of Berlin at dawn on the 2nd of May. The thing he remembered, the detail that stayed with him across all those decades, was not the smell of burning or the crack of shellfire. It was two street musicians somewhere in the wreckage playing Hawaiian guitar. That is the whole man in a single picture. He spent his life hearing the strange, incidental music at the edge of the greatest crime of the century. And somehow, right to the very end, never the screaming. Thanks for watching History Hangover, where we dig into the people and the moments the standard histories of the Second World War tend to walk straight past. If this is the kind of story you want more of, give the video a like, subscribe, and hit the bell so the next one finds you.